Liam Ashwood's pen moved carefully over the blueprint, making minor adjustments to the design of his new skyscraper. The clock in his office ticked past 9 p.m., but he hardly noticed. This project was his crowning achievement, the pinnacle of his career. He was so absorbed that the sudden ring of his cell phone startled him, causing a stray line across the paper. Annoyed, he grabbed the phone, ready to snap at whoever was interrupting him, but the caller ID made him pause. It was Jacob, his son, who never called this late unless something was wrong. "Jacob, what's going on?" Liam asked, his irritation quickly turning to concern. Jacob's voice was shaky, filled with emotion. I saw Mom at the Silver Crescent Hotel." Liam frowned, puzzled. "Okay, your mom's allowed to go to hotels, son." "No, Dad, she was with Tom. Your business partner." The words hit Liam like a physical blow. He sank into his chair, mind racing. "What do you mean, with Tom?" "They were together, like, together," Jacob clarified. Liam's throat went dry. "Send it to me now." Moments later, his phone buzzed. With trembling hands, he opened the video. The footage was blurry, clearly shot from a distance, but the figures on the hotel balcony were unmistakable. His wife, Victoria, wrapped in Tom's arms. As Liam watched, his stomach churned. He could catch bits of their conversation. "Push Liam out. Take control of the company. He won't see it coming." It was complete betrayal, not just of his marriage, but of his career and everything he had worked for. Liam took a deep breath, forcing back the surge of anger. "Jacob, listen to me. Go home immediately. Don't tell your mother you saw her, and act like everything is normal. I'll take care of this." "But, Dad, now, Jacob. Go home. I'll explain everything soon." After hanging up, Liam sat motionless for a moment, his mind racing. Then, with calm resolve, he picked up his office phone and dialed a familiar number. "Jack, it's Liam Ashwood. I need your help. My wife has been unfaithful, and I want to start divorce proceedings immediately." "Yes, I have proof. I also need to freeze our joint accounts and protect my assets." "No, it can't wait until morning. I'm coming to your office now." Liam gathered his things and headed for the door. As he switched off the lights, he glanced back at the blueprint on his desk. The stray line now cut across the entire design, like a fracture in the foundation of everything he had built. Fitting, he thought bitterly before stepping into the night, leaving behind the shattered remains of his life. Victoria Ashwood hummed softly as she pulled into the driveway, still exhilarated from her afternoon with Tom. The house was dark and quiet when she entered, which wasn't unusual. Liam often worked late, and Jacob was likely in his room playing video games. She flicked on the kitchen light, then froze. Something felt off. The air was tense, charged with a strange energy. Her eyes settled on a stack of papers on the counter, papers that hadn't been there that morning. Heart racing, she approached them cautiously. The top sheet bore an official letterhead, * notice of divorce proceedings. No, she whispered, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the papers, divorce filings, bank statements, and screenshots of the video of her and Tom on the hotel balcony. The blood drained from Victoria's face as reality sank in. He knew. Somehow, Liam knew everything. Panic surged as she grabbed her phone, trying Liam's number, but a robotic voice informed her the line was disconnected. Frantic, she tried calling Jacob, but got the same result. No, she muttered, racing upstairs. Jacob's room was empty, his closet half cleared out. In the master bedroom, Liam's side of the closet was open, his suitcases gone. Back downstairs, Victoria logged into the family computer, her hands shaking as she tried to access their joint bank accounts. They were frozen, not emptied, but inaccessible. She slumped into a chair, her mind reeling. How had everything unraveled so quickly? Just that afternoon, she had felt on top of the world, confident that her affair was secret and her plans with Tom were moving forward smoothly. But she should have known better. Liam was always 3 steps ahead, always prepared for every scenario. Of course, he wouldn't confront her directly. He would strike silently, calculating and ruthless. As the shock began to wear off, fear set in. Victoria knew Liam wouldn't stop at divorce. He would strip away everything she valued. And Tom, did he know yet? Were his accounts frozen too? Their entire plan was collapsing, and she was powerless to stop it. With shaking hands, she dialed Tom's number. It rang twice before he picked up, groggy. "Do you know what time it is, Victoria?" "He knows," she blurted, unable to contain her panic. "Liam knows everything." There was a long silence. When Tom spoke again, his voice was tense with fear. "What do you mean, everything?" "The affair, the plan to push him out of the company, all of it. He's filed for divorce, frozen our accounts. He and Jacob are gone." Tom exhaled sharply. "How? We were so careful." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Careful enough to be caught on video, apparently." "What are we going to do?" Tom asked, his voice shaky. "Call your lawyer," Victoria replied. "I called you first." "All right, here's what we'll do. Call your lawyer now, I'll do the same. We need to get ahead of this before Liam does more damage. We'll meet in the morning to figure out our next move." Victoria nodded, momentarily forgetting that Tom couldn't see her. Okay, you're right. We can fix this," Victoria said, trying to convince herself as she ended the call and dialed her lawyer's emergency number. But a cold dread crept into her stomach. She knew Liam too well. He wouldn't have acted without a watertight plan. Whatever was coming, she feared it might already be too late to stop it. The headlights of Liam's BMW sliced through the darkness as he drove down the deserted highway. Caleb sat silently in the passenger seat, staring out at the passing shadows. They had left the house just after midnight, slipping away like fugitives. Liam had been meticulous in his planning, leaving no trace of where they were headed. New identities, acquired through channels he hoped never to use, awaited them at their destination. He glanced at his son, his heart breaking at the pain visible on the boy's face. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Caleb shrugged, not turning from the window. "I guess. Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe, where we can start over." "What about mom, school, my friends?" Caleb asked. Liam sighed heavily. "I know this is hard, Caleb, but your mother, she made her choice. Right now, we have to protect ourselves." "By running away?" Caleb asked quietly. "It's not running away, it's a strategic retreat. We need time to regroup and plan our next move." Caleb finally turned to his father, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Did you know about Mom and Tom?" Liam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, I had no idea. How could she do this to us?" Caleb's voice was raw with pain, making Liam's chest tighten. He wanted to pull over and comfort his son, but they couldn't afford to stop. "I don't know, son. People do terrible things sometimes. But I promise, we'll get through this together." Caleb nodded slowly and turned back to the window. Liam focused on the road, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He had left a coded message for his most trusted employee, ensuring the firm's projects would continue in his absence. It wasn't ideal, but it would buy them time. As the miles passed, Liam's thoughts drifted to Victoria and Tom. By now, they'd be panicking, desperately searching for any sign of him and Caleb. Part of Liam, a dark, vengeful part, relished the thought of their fear. Let them squirm, let them feel a fraction of the pain they had caused. But he pushed the anger aside. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. He needed to shield Caleb from the emotional fallout and give them both time to heal and plan their next steps. If their sudden disappearance also prevented Victoria and Tom from hiding assets or crafting alibis, that was just an added bonus. As dawn broke, they crossed the state line, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. Liam reached over and squeezed Caleb's shoulder. "We're going to be okay, Caleb. I promise." As they drove into the unknown, Liam silently vowed to keep that promise, no matter the cost. Nathan Reed stood at his drafting table, pencil moving over the blueprint with ease. The open concept office around him was a far cry from the sleek corporate firm he had left behind 6 months ago. But there was a sense of fulfillment in this work that he hadn't felt in years. He glanced at the clock, nearly time for Ethan to be home from school. The name still felt foreign at times. Ethan, not Caleb. Just as he was now Nathan, not Liam. New names, new identities. A new life, carefully built in the aftermath of betrayal. Portland, Maine, was a calculated choice, far enough from their old life to avoid recognition. Yet close enough to the architecture scene that Nathan's skills wouldn't be wasted. And wasted they weren't. His small firm was already gaining a reputation for innovative, sustainable urban designs. Just then, the bell over the office door chimed, and Ethan trudged in, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a half-eaten apple in his hand. "Hey, kid," Nathan said, studying Ethan's face. The dark circles under Ethan's eyes seemed a shade lighter today, progress, however small. "How was school?" Ethan shrugged and collapsed into a chair. "Fine, I guess. We have a group project in history, and my partner seems cool." Nathan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Every new friendship was a potential risk, a possible crack in their carefully maintained anonymity. But he couldn't deny his son a shot at normalcy. "That's good," he said. "Just remember, I know," Ethan cut him off, rolling his eyes. "Keep it casual. Don't share too much personal info." "I'm not an idiot, Dad." Nathan sighed. "I know you're not. I just worry." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, I know. It's fine. I'm going to do my homework." As Ethan disappeared into the back room, which they had converted into a makeshift living space, Nathan turned back to his work. But his mind was miles away, lost in the past. He booted up his encrypted laptop, fingers moving swiftly as he navigated through layers of security. Within moments, he was reviewing the latest reports on Victoria and Tom's frantic attempts to find them. At first, it had been almost laughable to watch them flail, private investigators coming up empty-handed again and again. But lately, their efforts had grown more desperate, and Nathan knew why. The lawsuits were piling up, and the firm was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Good, he thought. Let them squirm. But it wasn't enough, not nearly enough to pay for what they had done. Nathan's eyes shifted to a folder labeled Project X, hiding a trove of incriminating evidence. Emails about fraudulent billing, records of kickbacks, and proof of stolen designs from junior architects. It had taken months of hacking and data mining to gather, but soon, it would be worth it. Very soon, he would spring the trap, and Victoria and Tom would finally face the true consequences of their actions. Nathan closed the laptop, a grim smile forming on his face. He had been blind once, oblivious to the schemes happening right under his nose. Not this time. Now, he was the one 3 steps ahead, and heaven help anyone who got in his way. Meanwhile, Victoria Reed stared at the stack of papers on her desk. Each one a ticking time bomb threatening to shatter her carefully constructed world. Lawsuits from clients alleging breach of contract, demands from suppliers, and, worst of all, a notice from the bank warning of foreclosure on the firm's office. How had it all fallen apart so fast? She knew the answer. It all started when Liam disappeared, taking Caleb with him. In a single moment, she'd lost her husband, her son, and the guiding hand that had led the firm to success. At first, she and Tom were confident they could weather the storm. They had connections, skills, and charm. But as weeks turned into months with no trace of Liam or Caleb, cracks began to show. Clients grew wary, doubting the stability of a firm whose founding partner had vanished. Junior architects, once eager to impress, now looked at them with suspicion. Then came the lawsuits, one after another, like falling dominoes, chipping away at their reputation, resources, and resolve. A knock at the door snapped Victoria out of her brooding. Tom entered, his once crisp suit now rumpled, dark circles under his eyes mirroring her own. "Any word?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Tom shook his head. "Nothing. It's like they vanished into thin air." The private investigator in Boston thought he had a lead, but it turned out to be another dead end. Vanessa slumped in her chair. "We can't keep this up, Marcus. The money's running out, and if we don't find a way to settle these lawsuits..." "I know," Marcus said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "But what choice do we have? If we could just find Liam, make him see reason." A bitter laugh escaped Vanessa. "Make him see reason? After what we did? He'll destroy us, Marcus, and you know he will." Before Marcus could respond, Vanessa's computer chimed with an incoming email. She opened it, her eyes widening at the contents. "What is it?" Marcus asked, leaning over her shoulder to read. It's a buyout offer for the firm." Marcus frowned. "From who?" "I don't know, some holding company I've never heard of. But look at these numbers, Marcus. This could solve everything." As they pored over the offer's details, neither noticed the tiny camera hidden in the potted plant on Vanessa's desk, silently recording their every move. Liam leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile forming as he watched the live feed from Vanessa's office. The bait had been taken, just as he knew it would. It had been almost too easy. Shell companies, a trusted proxy handling the negotiations, putting Vanessa and Marcus's fate squarely in his hands. They were so desperate for a lifeline, they hadn't even questioned the suspicious terms of the buyout, full disclosure of all finances and projects, a non-compete clause that would effectively end their careers, and personal guarantees against any undisclosed liabilities. Liam chuckled darkly. They'd sign everything, he was sure of it, giving him all the evidence he needed to bury them. A noise from the other room caught his attention. Ethan, no, Caleb, he reminded himself, was home from school. Liam quickly closed the video feed and cleared his expression. No need for his son to see the depths of his revenge. Hey, kiddo, he called as Ethan walked in, dropping his backpack on the floor. How was school? Ethan shrugged. Fine, I guess. We started a new unit in history. The teacher wants us to pick a historical figure for a report. Liam nodded, trying to sound enthusiastic. That sounds interesting. Anyone in particular catch your eye? I was thinking maybe Frank Lloyd Wright, Ethan replied, a hint of his old passion for architecture returning. You know, since we're supposed to be this big architecture family and all. The words cut like a knife, this big architecture family . The life they'd left behind, the legacy now tainted by betrayal. But Liam forced a smile. That's a great choice. Wright was a visionary. I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job on the report. Ethan hesitated, fidgeting with his backpack strap. Dad, do you think? I mean, is there any chance we might be able to go home soon? Back to our real names? Liam's jaw tightened. Ethan, we've talked about this. It's not safe yet. Your mother and Tom. I know, Ethan cut him off. They betrayed you, they're trying to find us, blah blah blah. But Dad, it's been months. Don't you think maybe it's time to? I don't know, try to work things out for real, instead of all this cloak and dagger stuff? For a moment, Liam was tempted to tell his son everything, the evidence he'd gathered, the trap he was setting, the reckoning to come. But Ethan was still young, still clinging to the hope of reconciliation. He wasn't ready to see the full extent of the betrayal or understand the lengths Liam would go to make things right. I'm working on it, son, Liam said. I promise we won't have to live like this forever. Trust me a little longer, okay? Ethan nodded, though doubt was evident in his eyes, as he turned and trudged off to his room. Liam turned back to his computer, his mind already plotting the next steps. Soon, he promised himself. Soon it would all be over, and they could return to their real lives. But first, Vanessa and Tom had to pay, and pay they would, in full. Jack Hawthorne prided himself on being the best private investigator in the business. He'd cracked cases that stumped the FBI and tracked down people in countries that barely existed on maps. But the Liam Ashwood case? It was making him question his skills. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the web of connections and dead ends pinned to his office wall. 6 months of work, and he was no closer to finding Liam or Ethan than he'd been on day one. It didn't make sense. A man like Liam, successful architect, high-profile career, doesn't just vanish without a trace. There should have been something, credit card transactions, phone records, school enrollments for the kid, but there was nothing. It was as if they had ceased to exist the moment they drove away that night. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed as they landed on a new addition to his evidence board. A series of architectural designs that had been emerging in Portland, Maine, over the last few months. Innovative, sustainable urban projects bearing a striking resemblance to Liam's signature style. It was a long shot. Plenty of architects were embracing sustainability these days, but something about these designs bothered him. The attention to detail, the clever urban planning solutions, it all screamed Liam Ashwood. He'd sent an associate to Portland to investigate, but nothing conclusive had turned up. The designs were credited to a Nathan Reed, a newcomer with a suspiciously thin background. Hawthorne's computer pinged, signaling a new email. He opened it, raising an eyebrow as he read the contents. His associate in Portland had managed to snap a few long-distance photos of Nathan Reed. The images were grainy, taken from too far away to be certain, but there was something about the man's posture, the way he moved. Hawthorne's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up an old photo of Liam Ashwood for comparison. Jack Hawthorne overlaid the images, adjusting for the difference in resolution. Gotcha, he muttered, a predatory grin spreading across his face. He reached for his phone, ready to call his client with the breakthrough. But something made him pause, finger hovering over the dial button. This was big, career-defining big. The kind of case that could set him up for life if he played his cards right. Did he really want to hand it over to Victoria Reed just yet? No, he decided. He needed more concrete proof, not just a hunch based on grainy photos. He'd give it a few more days, see what else he could uncover about this Nathan Reed character. Little did Hawthorne know, his hesitation had just bought Liam Ashwood the time he needed to execute his plan. Caleb, no, Ethan, he reminded himself for the 100th time, stared at the blank document on his laptop. The cursor blinking mockingly as he tried to start his history report on Frank Lloyd Wright. But his mind wasn't on famous architects. It was back home, with his old friends, his mother, and the life he'd left behind. He glanced at the door to make sure his dad wasn't around, then opened an incognito browser window. His fingers hovered over the keys before he typed in a familiar name, Jake Thompson. Jake had been his best friend since kindergarten, little league, science fairs, marathon gaming sessions that stretched late into the night. Now, because of his parents' mess, Ethan had ghosted him without a word. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan navigated to an encrypted messaging app he'd discovered online. He created a new account under a fake name and sent a message to Jake's gaming handle. Hey man, it's me. I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to let you know I'm okay. I can't say much, but I miss you guys. Hope you're doing alright. His finger hovered over the send button. He knew it was risky. His dad had emphasized the importance of maintaining their cover, of not leaving any digital breadcrumbs. But he was tired of lying, of pretending to be someone he wasn't. He just wanted a small connection to his old life. Taking a deep breath, Ethan hit send. The message disappeared into the void, and he quickly closed the browser window, his heart pounding. What Ethan didn't know was that at that very moment, in a nondescript office hundreds of miles away, an alert popped up on Hawthorne's computer. The Pi had cast a wide net in his search for the Ashwoods, including monitoring known associates for unusual activity. An encrypted message sent to Jake Thompson's gaming account from an unknown source? That definitely qualified as unusual. As Hawthorne began tracing the message, Ethan sat back in his chair, a mix of relief and anxiety churning inside him. He'd done it, he'd reached out. Now all he could do was wait and hope. Meanwhile, Liam's fingers flew over the keyboard, lines of code scrolling rapidly. He'd detected the breach in their security almost immediately. A single outgoing message from Ethan's computer to an encrypted messaging service. His first reaction was anger. He had trusted Ethan to understand the gravity of their situation, to follow the carefully laid rules. But as he worked to erase the digital footprint left by his son's moment of weakness, anger gave way to something else, understanding. Ethan was just a kid ripped away from everything he knew, forced to live a lie for months. Of course, he would reach out eventually. Liam should have seen it coming. As he finished covering their tracks, Liam leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This close call was a wake-up call. He'd been so focused on his revenge and protecting them from external threats that he had neglected the real danger, Ethan's isolation. He needed to accelerate his plans. The longer they lived this half-life, straddling their old and new identities, the greater the risk, not just of discovery, but of losing Ethan altogether. Decision made, Liam pulled up the file containing all the evidence he'd gathered against Victoria and Tom. It was time to act, to end this once and for all. As he put the final pieces in motion, Liam allowed himself a grim smile. Victoria and Tom thought they had won when they betrayed him. They had no idea of the storm coming for them. Let them try to find us, he thought. We'll be ready, and this time, I'll hold all the cards. The game was in its final stages, and Liam intended to win. Victoria Reed's heels clicked against the polished floor of a Portland office building, each step echoing with grim determination. Beside her, Tom fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting around as if expecting an ambush. Are you sure about this? He whispered, for what felt like the 100th time since they landed in Maine. Victoria's jaw tightened. We don't have a choice, Tom. If Hawthorne's right, if Liam is really here, we have to confront him before he can do more damage. The elevator dinged, revealing a modest hallway. At the end, a frosted glass door bore the name, Reed Architectural Solutions. Victoria's heart pounded as they approached. Nathan Reed, the alias Liam had apparently adopted, was just beyond that door. It was almost laughable. Did he really think a new name could erase their history? Without hesitation, she pushed open the door. The reception area was empty, but voices came from an office nearby. One was achingly familiar. And if we adjust the solar panels here, we can increase efficiency by at least 15%, it said. Liam, after all the sleepless nights and frantic searches, he was right there, just steps away. Victoria strode forward, Tom trailing reluctantly behind. As they entered the main office space, the conversation ceased. Liam, no, Nathan, stood at a drafting table, blueprints spread before him. Beside him, a lanky teenager who could only be Ethan stared at them in shock. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension was palpable. Then Liam straightened, his expression hardening. Well, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, isn't this a pleasant surprise? To what do I owe the honor? Victoria struggled for words. All the speeches she'd rehearsed evaporated under Liam's icy stare. It was Tom who spoke first, stepping forward with a nervous chuckle. Come on, Liam, enough cloak and dagger nonsense. We're here to talk, to work things out. Liam's laugh was sharp and bitter. Work things out? Which part exactly? The part where you sleep with my wife or the part where you plan to steal my company? Tom blanched, stepping back. Victoria forced herself to meet Liam's gaze. We made mistakes, she said quietly. Terrible mistakes. But disappearing like this, taking Ethan, it's not right. Liam's voice was dangerously soft. Do I, Victoria? Do I really? Because protecting my son from two manipulative liars seems pretty right from where I stand. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Dad, he began, but Liam cut him off. It's okay, son, he said gently. Why don't you wait in the back room? The adults need to talk. Ethan hesitated, but something in Liam's expression convinced him to obey. As soon as the door closed behind him, the room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elias's eyes, cold as winter frost, swept over Vanessa and Marcus. So, he said, you found me. Congratulations. I'm sure whatever bottom-feeding pie you hired is very proud of himself. The question is, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? Vanessa took a deep breath, steeling herself. We want to make things right, Elias. The company is falling apart without you. The lawsuits, the financial troubles, we can fix it together. Come home. Let's put this whole ugly mess behind us. For a moment, something flickered in Elias's eyes, regret. Longing, but it vanished so quickly Vanessa couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. Put it behind us? Elias repeated, his voice flat. Just like that? Wave a magic wand and pretend none of it ever happened? Is that really what you think is going to happen here? Marcus, apparently emboldened by the lack of immediate violence, stepped forward. Look, we all made mistakes. But dragging this out, hiding away like some kind of fugitive, it's not good for anyone, especially not Caleb. Think about his future, Elias. His friends, his school. You can't keep him isolated forever. It was the wrong thing to say. Elias's expression darkened, a storm gathering behind his eyes. His future? He snarled. Don't you dare pretend to care about my son's future. Not after what you've done. What *** done? Marcus's own temper flared. You're the one who kidnapped him, who's forcing him to live a ridiculous false life. You think his new friends would stick around if they knew the truth? Maybe I should go tell them right now. I'm sure they'd be very interested to learn that their buddy Ethan, or whatever you're calling him, is really, he never finished. In 2 quick strides, Elias closed the distance between them, his fist connecting with Marcus's jaw with a sickening crack. Marcus stumbled backward, blood trickling from a split lip. Dad, Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide with shock and fear. Elias froze, his raised fist slowly lowering. For a moment, the mask of cold fury slipped, revealing a glimpse of the pain and anguish beneath. It's okay, Caleb, he said softly. Everything's going to be okay. I promise. Vanessa, who had been watching the confrontation with growing horror, saw her chance. Caleb, honey, she said, taking a tentative step toward her son. I've missed you so much. Please, can we just talk? Your father and I, we can work this out. We can be a family again. Caleb's eyes darted between his parents, confusion and conflict written across his face. For a heart-stopping moment, Vanessa thought he might actually come to her. But then his expression hardened, and he moved to stand beside Elias. "No," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "No, we can't." Elias placed a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Vanessa and Marcus. "I think," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "it's time for you to leave." Marcus, still nursing his bloodied lip, opened his mouth to argue. But Vanessa grabbed his arm, shaking her head slightly. This confrontation had gone sideways in every possible way. They needed to regroup, to figure out their next move. "This isn't over, Elias," she said as they backed toward the door. "You can't run forever." Elias's smile was cold and sharp, like a knife's edge. "Oh, I'm not running anymore, Vanessa. In fact, I'm just getting started." As the door closed behind them, Vanessa felt a chill run down her spine. She had come here expecting to find Elias broken, desperate. Instead, she'd found a man filled with icy resolve, a man with a plan. And suddenly, she was very, very afraid of what that plan might be. Elias waited until he was sure Vanessa and Marcus were gone before allowing himself to slump against the drafting table. The adrenaline draining from his system and leaving him feeling hollow and exhausted. "Dad?" Caleb's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you okay?" Elias straightened, forcing a reassuring smile onto his face. "I'm fine, son. It's been a long day." Caleb nodded, but his eyes were troubled. What happens now?" "Now," Elias said, his voice hardening with resolve, "we finish this once and for all." He crossed to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as he pulled up file after file, evidence he'd spent months compiling. Each damning piece of information, a nail in Victoria and Tom's coffin. "I need you to listen carefully, Ethan," Liam said, not looking up from the screen. "What I'm about to do, it's going to change everything, and I need to know that you understand why. Why it has to be done." Slowly, methodically, Liam laid out the extent of Victoria and Tom's crimes, the fraudulent billing practices, the kickbacks from contractors, the designs stolen from junior architects and passed off as their own. With each revelation, Ethan's expression grew more horrified. How could they do all this?" he whispered. "Greed," Liam said simply. "Arrogance. The belief that they could get away with anything." He turned to face his son fully, his expression grave. "I know I've asked a lot of you these past months. The new identity, the secrecy, it wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed time to gather all of this, to make sure they couldn't wiggle their way out of it." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd just learned. Finally, he looked up at his father, a new resolve in his eyes. "What do we do now?" Liam smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. "Now we spring the trap." With a few keystrokes, he sent off a series of pre-prepared emails. To the FBI, to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee, to key members of the press. "By this time tomorrow," he said, "everyone will know exactly what kind of people Victoria Reed and Tom Hayes really are." As if on cue, his phone began to ring. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Liam answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello, Victoria. I assume by now you've received my little care package?" Victoria's voice was shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "What have you done, Liam? Do you have any idea?" "Oh, I have a very good idea," Liam cut her off. "I have a good idea of exactly what you and Tom have been up to all these years. The fraud, the theft, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "What I want," Liam said, "is for you and Tom to come back to my office. Immediately. We have some paperwork to go over." "Paperwork?" Tom's voice now, sounding panicked. "What are you talking about?" "Confessions," Liam said simply. "Detailed confessions of every illegal thing you've done, along with some, let's call them non-disclosure agreements. You'll sign them all, or I'll make sure every scrap of evidence I have ends up in the hands of the authorities." "You can't do this," Victoria hissed. "You'll destroy everything we've built." Liam's laugh was bitter. "No, Victoria, you destroyed it. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice defeated. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. As the call disconnected, Liam turned to Ethan. His son's face was pale, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Ethan asked. Liam nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out, all of it." As they waited for Victoria and Tom to arrive, Liam felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Soon it would all be over, justice would be served, and maybe, just maybe, he and Ethan could start to rebuild their lives. The next hour passed in a blur of tense silence and scratching pens. Victoria and Tom, their faces ashen, signed page after page of meticulously prepared documents, confessions detailing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen design, every ethical breach. Liam watched them with cold satisfaction, Ethan a silent presence at his side. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for months. His revenge, served on crisp legal paper and bound with unbreakable contracts. As Victoria signed the final page, her hand trembling slightly, she looked up at Liam with eyes full of despair. "Is this really what you want?" she asked softly. "To see us ruined? Imprisoned?" For a moment, Liam faltered. The weight of their shared history, the good times, the love they'd once shared, pressed down on him. But then he remembered the betrayal, the pain, and his resolve hardened once more. "What I want," he said, his voice low and controlled, "is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You took everything from me, my family, my career, my trust. Now, it's your turn to lose." Victoria looked down, defeated, as Tom stared blankly at the papers. Liam rose from his chair, signaling the end of the meeting. "You know where the door is," he said. "And don't come back." Victoria and Tom left without another word, and as the door closed behind them, Liam turned to Ethan, his voice softening. "It's over," he said. "We can start again, for real this time." Ethan nodded, a mix of relief and uncertainty in his eyes. "I hope so, Dad," he said quietly. Liam wrapped his arm around his son's shoulders, leading him away from the table covered in confessions. "We will," he promised. Together. Each damning piece of information was a nail in Victoria and Tom's coffin. "I need you to listen carefully, Ethan," Liam said, not looking up from the screen. "What I'm about to do will change everything, and I need you to understand why. Why it has to be done." Slowly and methodically, Liam laid out the extent of Victoria and Tom's crimes, the fraudulent billing practices, the kickbacks from contractors, the designs stolen from junior architects and claimed as their own. With each revelation, Ethan's expression grew more horrified. How could they do all this?" he whispered. "Greed," Liam said simply. "Arrogance. The belief that they could get away with anything." He turned to face his son, his expression grave. "I know I've asked a lot from you these past months. The new identity, the secrecy, it wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed time to gather all of this, to make sure they couldn't escape it." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd just learned. Finally, he looked up at his father with a new resolve in his eyes. "What do we do now?" Liam smiled, a grim and satisfied expression. "Now we spring the trap." With a few keystrokes, he sent off a series of pre-prepared emails. To the FBI, to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee, to key members of the press. "By this time tomorrow," he said, "everyone will know exactly what kind of people Victoria Reed and Tom Hayes really are." As if on cue, his phone began to ring. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Liam answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello, Victoria. I assume by now you've received my little care package?" Victoria's voice shook with a mix of rage and fear. "What have you done, Liam? Do you have any idea?" "Oh, I have a very good idea," Liam cut her off. "I have a good idea of exactly what you and Tom have been up to all these years, the fraud, the theft, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "What I want," Liam said, "is for you and Tom to come back to my office. Immediately. We have some paperwork to go over." "Paperwork?" Tom's voice now, sounding panicked. "What are you talking about?" "Confessions," Liam said simply. "Detailed confessions of every illegal thing you've done, along with some. Let's call them non-disclosure agreements. You'll sign them all, or I'll make sure every scrap of evidence I have ends up in the hands of the authorities." "You can't do this," Victoria hissed. "You'll destroy everything we've built." Liam's laugh was bitter. "No, Victoria, you destroyed it. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice defeated. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. As the call disconnected, Liam turned to Ethan. His son's face was pale, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Ethan asked. Liam nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out, all of it." As they waited for Victoria and Tom to arrive, Liam felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Soon it would all be over, justice would be served, and maybe, just maybe, he and Ethan could start to rebuild their lives. The next hour passed in a blur of tense silence and scratching pens. Victoria and Tom, their faces ashen, signed page after page of meticulously prepared documents, confessions detailing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen design, every ethical breach. Liam watched them with cold satisfaction, Ethan a silent presence by his side. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for months. His revenge, served on crisp legal paper and bound with unbreakable contracts. As Victoria signed the final page, her hand trembling slightly, she looked up at Liam with eyes full of despair. "Is this really what you want?" she asked softly. "To see us ruined? Imprisoned?" For a moment, Liam faltered. The weight of their shared history, the good times, the love they'd once had, pressed down on him. But then he remembered the betrayal, the pain, and his resolve hardened once more. "What I want," he said, "is for you to face the consequences of your actions, something you both seem to have avoided for far too long." Tom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the process, suddenly slammed his fist on the table. "You sanctimonious hypocrite," he snarled. "You think you're so much better than us? You've manipulated and schemed just as much as we ever did. You're no different. That's enough." Ethan's voice, firm and clear, cut through Tom's tirade. He stepped forward, fixing both Victoria and Tom with a hard stare. "You don't get to play the victims here, not after what you've done." Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. "Ethan, please." "No," Ethan shook his head. "I've heard enough. You betrayed Dad, you betrayed me, you betrayed everything our family was supposed to stand for. And for what? Money? Power? Was it worth it?" The silence that followed was deafening, and for once, Victoria and Tom had no words. Liam placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. A surge of pride mixing with the bittersweet realization that his son had grown up far too quickly in these past months. "It's done," he said quietly. "You should go now. Your lawyers will be in touch regarding the next steps." As Victoria and Tom gathered their things, moving like shell-shocked survivors of some great catastrophe, Liam felt the last of his anger drain away. In its place was a bone-deep weariness and an unexpected pang of regret, mourning for what might have been. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving Liam and Ethan alone in the suddenly too quiet office. "So," Ethan said after a long moment, "what happens now?" Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. Now we start over, for real this time." He walked to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. It was a beautiful view, one he'd come to appreciate over these past months, but it wasn't home, not really. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for Liam and Ethan Ashwood to make their return." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean we can go back, use our real names?" Liam nodded. "The truth is going to come out soon enough. There's no point in hiding anymore. And you? You deserve the chance to reclaim your life, son. Your friends, your school, all of it." To his surprise, Ethan didn't immediately light up at the prospect. Instead, his brow furrowed in thought. "What about you, Dad? Your career, your reputation. Won't this hurt you too?" The question caught Liam off guard. He'd been so focused on his plan, on bringing Victoria and Tom to justice, that he hadn't fully considered the implications for his own future. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "There will probably be some fallout, questions about why I disappeared, about my role in all of this. But the truth is on our side. We'll weather it." Ethan nodded slowly, then stepped forward and did something that shocked Liam to his core. He hugged him, tight and fierce. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Ethan mumbled into his shirt. "For standing up to them. For doing the right thing." Liam felt a lump form in his throat. He hugged his son back, marveling at how tall he'd grown, how strong he'd become. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo. More than you know." As they broke apart, Liam felt a shift in the air, as if a great weight had been lifted. The revenge that had consumed him for so long suddenly felt hollow in the face of his son's unwavering support. "Come on," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Let's get out of here for a bit. I think we both could use some fresh air." They walked in companionable silence through the streets of Portland, the crisp autumn air filling their lungs. As they reached a small park overlooking the harbor, Liam guided them to a bench. "Ethan," he began, then corrected himself. "No, I suppose it's time we went back to our real names." "Ethan, I owe you an apology." The boy looked up, surprise evident in his eyes. "For what?" Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. "For dragging you into this mess. For uprooting your life. For making you live a lie. I was so focused on getting justice, no, on getting revenge, that I didn't stop to think about what it was doing to you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the boats bobbing in the harbor. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "I won't lie, Dad, it's been hard. Really hard. I miss my friends, my school, hell, I even miss our old house sometimes." He turned to look at Liam, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I understand why you did it, and I'm glad we stuck together through all this." Liam felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're a better man than I am, son. I let my anger consume me. I became so focused on bringing your mother and Tom down that I lost sight of what really matters." "And what's that?" Ethan asked. "You," Liam said simply. "Our family, what's left of it anyway. Moving forward, building something positive instead of tearing things down." Ethan nodded slowly. "So, what happens now? Do we just go back to our old lives?" Liam shook his head. "No, I don't think we can ever truly go back. Too much has changed. But we can move forward, start fresh, but this time as ourselves." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin to set over the water. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "Dad, I know Mom and Tom did terrible things, but is there any chance for, I don't know, forgiveness? Not forgetting, but moving past it somehow?" Liam felt a flash of his old anger, but he pushed it down. "I don't know, son. That's going to take time, a lot of time. But I promise you, I'll try. For your sake, if nothing else." Ethan nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer for now. As they walked back to their apartment, Liam's mind was already racing with plans. Not for revenge this time, but for redemption. For both of them. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Liam and Ethan reclaimed their true identities, facing the inevitable media storm with a united front. There were questions, of course, accusations, but armed with the truth and a mountain of evidence, they weathered it all. Victoria and Tom faced the consequences of their actions. The legal proceedings were swift and merciless, their signed confessions leaving little room for leniency. As Liam watched them being led away in handcuffs, he felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of waste. But even as that chapter of their lives closed, a new one was beginning. True to his word, Liam anonymously established a fund to compensate the junior architects whose work had been stolen. It wouldn't undo the damage done, but it was a start. And then, on a crisp Saturday morning, Liam found himself standing before a group of wide-eyed teenagers at a local community center. Ethan stood beside him, nervously shuffling a stack of papers. "Good morning, everyone," Liam began. "I'm Liam Ashwood, and this is my son, Ethan. We're here today to talk to you about architecture, but more than that, we're here to talk about building. Building structures, yes, but also building lives. Building integrity." As he spoke, Liam felt a warmth spread through his chest. This, he realized, was what he'd been missing, not the thrill of revenge, but the simple joy of creating something positive. Ethan stepped forward, his initial nervousness fading as he began to explain the basics of drafting to the group. Liam watched with pride, seeing not just his son, but a young man coming into his own. As the session wound down, one of the kids raised her hand. "Mr. Ashwood," she asked, "why are you doing this? I mean, you're a famous architect. Why bother with us?" Liam exchanged a look with Ethan before answering. "Because," he said softly, "everyone deserves a chance to build something beautiful. And sometimes, the most important thing we can build is a better version of ourselves." As they packed up their supplies, Ethan bumped his shoulder against Liam's. "Nice speech, Dad," he said with a grin. "Very after-school special." Liam laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Hey, watch it. I'm still learning this whole role model thing. They stepped out into the sunlight, the future stretching before them like a blank blueprint, ready to be filled with new designs, new dreams. It wouldn't be easy. Liam knew the scars of the past wouldn't fade overnight. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Real, genuine hope. As they walked down the street, Ethan's voice drifted up. "Hey, Dad, I'm glad we're doing this together." Liam smiled, throwing an arm around his son's shoulders. "Me too, son, me too." And as they disappeared around the corner, the sun glinted off the windows of the surrounding buildings as if the very city was winking at them. Approving of this new blueprint they were creating, not of steel and glass, but of redemption and second chances. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen and I will see you there.